Vex on the field.
With the release of Season of the Chosen, the core modes of Destiny 2 got some much needed new loot. One of the most interesting pieces of loot is a Gambit handcannon known as the Bottom Dollar. This weapon excels in both PvP and PvE and is being sought by a large number of the community. The only problem is that this weapon is exclusive to Gambit, and I don't think I have to explain that a large portion of the Destiny community does not enjoy Gambit. But with this video I hope to change that, through sharing some tips and tricks about the most current iteration of Gambit, which will hopefully make the mode more enjoyable. I plan on diving into everything from loadouts to small tips and everything in between. But before I get into that, I just want to give a quick plug to my Discord. I'm trying to get the server to a decent enough size to start having community game nights and other events. So if you're interested in that, please hit the link up below, and with that out of the way, let's get back to Gambit. Gambit is one of the most complex and engaging experiences within Destiny, and that can make learning how to excel in it a rather hard task. Every part of the mode has nuance, and understanding those nuances can be the difference between winning or losing. But before I go too in depth on how to get better at Gambit, I want to first go over what causes most teams to lose and honestly kinda suck at Gambit, at least from my experiences. There are 3 things that I see teams usually mess up which cause them to lose their game of Gambit. The first mistake teams make is that they don't properly handle the opening wave of enemies, which can cause massive problems for the rest of the game. Teams will also often be unable to handle an enemy invader, which can also cause massive problems for the team. And finally, teams will often be unable to complete good invasions. Those 3 things are what cause most teams to get absolutely blown out in Gambit, and I hope to explain how to avoid each of these pitfalls. First of all, let's discuss the opening wave of enemies, and what teams should avoid. This wave is very important because it often decides who will win and lose the game. The opening wave decides who gets first invasion, who steals the first motes, and how big of a lead you start the game off with. All of these reasons are why it's extremely important to not lose any motes during the first wave of enemies. This means don't get careless, and if your health starts going down, back off so you don't lose your motes. It's not worth risking all of your motes just to get one more enemy. And once you have all of your motes collected, there is another thing that many teams do not think about, and that is who banks first. Most teams will rush to bank their motes first in order to get the early lead at the start of the game. It's usually better though to hold off and be the second team to bank your motes because it offers a lot of benefits to your team, and this is due to the stealing mechanic that if you have 2 blockers down, you'll begin stealing the other team's motes for your own team. And if you're the first team to bank, then there are no motes for you to steal, and it leaves your motes very easy to steal by the other team. This is why you want to wait for the other team to bank their motes first, kill the blockers that they sent over, and then send over your own blockers to start stealing. This accomplishes a lot for your team. First of all, it takes motes away from the other team, gains more motes for your team, forces the other team to leave their current wave of enemies to deal with your blockers, and sets you up to be very close to your first invasion. From my experience, the best setup for this is if you bank 2 medium blockers and a small blocker. This setup makes it hard to kill the blockers with just one person, which means either you're stealing motes for a longer time, or the other team has to take more players away from killing their enemy wave. Either way, it's a win-win for your team, and it sets you up very good for the rest of the game. But let's just say that the opening bank doesn't go your way, and now the enemy team is invading you. Countering invaders is one of the most important things in all of Gambit, and there are really 2 ways to do it. The first is to simply kill the invader, and the second is to waste the invader's time. My recommendation to deal with an invader is to have one person on your team avoid picking up and banking motes. This player should be killing ads just like everyone else to help create motes for the rest of the team, but they should not be picking them up because this player's main purpose is to be ready to counter invaders at a moment's notice. This means that as soon as your team's invaded, this player should drop whatever it is they're doing to search out and hunt the invader. While killing the invader should be this player's priority, if they're able to just keep the invader busy for the 30 seconds that their invasion lasts, that works just as good. Well, I shouldn't say just as good, but it works pretty good because it prevents your team from getting a major setback by losing a lot of motes. And while any loadout could work for this, there are a few weapons I would like to recommend. First of all, for primary weapons, I heavily recommend the Malfeasance handcannon. It does bonus damage to invaders, and the exotic perk causes explosions after 5 bullets, which can easily burn through an invader even with an overshield. The Malfeasance also helps deal with taken enemies, which allows you to burn through blockers and adds during the primeval phase. Another good weapon to deal with invaders would be the Izanagi's Burden exotic sniper rifle. The overcharged rounds this weapon can fire will one-shot invaders, which allows an easy way to put down invaders on any map, and the weapon can also put out decent DPS, which will help you when you need to kill the primeval. But beyond my weapon recommendations for this, I would also advise, just as a general strategy, as soon as you find out that an invader is invading, you should drop whatever you're doing, run out, and try and find wherever the invader spawned from and keep him contained in his spawn area, because he usually cannot get out without having to deal with you then, and then this allows you to keep him there, keep him engaged in a fight, and keep him away from your teammates who are trying to stay safe and secure their moats. But being able to deal with an invader is just one side of the PvP aspect of Gambit, because if your team really wants to succeed, then they will also need to be able to put out good invasions. A good invasion doesn't just mean that you kill a lot of the enemy team, but it could also mean that you tied up the enemy team for 30 seconds so they couldn't bank their moats. Or it could also mean that you defended your blockers as they steal moats from the enemy's bank. All of these options benefit your team, but obviously getting kills and taking moats directly away from the enemy is the best outcome to go for. So when you invade, you should obviously be focused towards killing the enemy with the most moats. These players will usually be the furthest away from you and actively evading you. To deal with this, I recommend long-range weapons such as sniper rifles, arbalists, Leviathan's Breath, or Xenophage. But I also recommend players use tracking weapons like Jotun and tracking rocket launchers. These weapons will allow you to pick off easy targets from long distances, while at the same time pissing off the players you kill. This is especially helpful in Gambit because if a team goes down at all, they will oftentimes give up or stop giving it 100% effort. I'm sure nearly all of you can think of a scenario where your team was just absolutely shit on by an invader, and you guys just kind of gave up, like you just thought there was no point. And that just really speaks to how powerful invasions are in Gambit, and why it's super important that your team has a good handle on them, both from a defensive point of view and from an offensive point of view. But even with that said, it's important to remember that even the best Gambit teams will still have bad games where an invader just completely shits on them, and when that happens, it's important to not give up. Because while I did spend the last 30 seconds or whatever talking about how demoralizing a bad invasion is, you can still come back from a setback like that. I mean, it can be pretty easy to look up at the scoreboard and see the enemy with a 20 or 30 point lead and just think there's no way to win this. But in reality, one successful wave of blockers accompanied by an invader can easily drop that lead down to single digits. I've personally come back from a loss in Gambit many times, and I've had enemy teams do the same thing to me. What's important to recover from a setback is pretty simple. You don't give up. And the best way from my experience to accomplish this is to send 2 large blockers or 2 medium blockers accompanied by 1 or 2 small blockers. So in total you're sending 3 blockers over, but basically you just need to ensure that one of them is a small blocker so that they can provide the overshield to the other bigger blockers. Then invade immediately after you send these blockers over, and this invader's objective should be to defend the blockers for as long as possible so that they are able to steal as many moats as possible. I mean, think about it. All the blockers need to do is steal 10 to 15 moats, and then that 20 to 30 moat lead is gone. And if the invader can take a few of the enemies down with him while he's there, that's just an added bonus. And then boom, just like that, that 20 to 30 lead is gone and your team is right back in the fight. And that once again just shows how powerful invasions can be and how important it is for your team to have a good handle on them. But anyways, those are kind of all of my main game long-term strats that really help me win games. And I want to add a few extra smaller tips regarding Gambit that while they might not win a game, they should be able to give you some small advantages throughout a match. The first tip I have is that if you're going to invade using a super such as a Golden Gun or Titan Behemoth, then you should pop the super before going into the invasion portal. This way, the enemy team will not get a sound cue that they have a super coming their way, and it may allow you to catch a few of them by surprise, especially if you have a ranged super like the Stasis Warlock or Gunslinger. Another tip I have is that if the other team gets their Primeval out first, honestly, more than likely, it's probably game over for you guys, but that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. My best advice is to send over 4 small blockers instead of 2 medium or 2 large blockers. This is because these small blockers interrupt the enemy's damage phase and can buy your team a few precious seconds to catch up to the damage they've done to their Primeval. And then my final tip is focused specifically towards solo players. Solo players oftentimes feel helpless in Gambit, but you can definitely make a difference. The biggest thing solo players can do is basically play the old sentry role from Gambit Prime. I discussed part of this role earlier, but I think it's very important, so I'm going to repeat it. The sentry's role is to keep your bank clear of blockers and to hunt down invaders. This can be easily covered by a solo player and offers a great benefit to your team and drastically increases your chances of winning. This means that when the enemy team sends over blockers, you should be on your way to clear your bank out so that your team can bank their most whenever they're ready. And when the enemy invades, you should be the one pushing out to hunt the invader instead of hiding with the rest of your team. Accomplishing these tasks takes a lot of pressure off of your teammates, which in turn allows them to focus on the objective at hand. This playstyle allows even solo players to have a massive impact on the game, and I've even upset some 4-man clans through playing with this playstyle. But that's really all I have to say regarding Gambit, and I hope that these tips will make your bottom dollar grind easier. And if you liked what you saw today, then feel free to check out my previous Destiny and Halo videos. And if you want more, then please like and subscribe. And until next time, goodbye.